In a world where the desert stretches longer than hope, Tank Girl crashes in, unbothered, unapologetic, and stitched together with rebellion. A combination of animation, live action, and chaos tells the story of a rebellious anti-heroine who takes on corrupt corporations with a tank and zero fear. Today, we dive into the story of a cult icon who made a mess, made a point, and never looked back. We get into this explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Origins of Tank Girl, from comic to screen. Before Tank Girl was a movie, she was a riot on paper, which was unfiltered, unsanitized, and proudly absurd. Created in 1988 by artist Jamie Hewlett and writer Alan Martin, Tank Girl debuted in the culture magazine Deadline and immediately set itself apart from anything else on the shelves. Tank Girl was nothing ordinary. Its imagery, sketched and chaotic panels that read like they were yanked out of a punk scene, was only part of the equation. The world was cluttered, noisy, and difficult to nail down. Set in a post-apocalyptic Australia that looked more like a junkyard playground than a dystopia, Tank Girl was filled with corrupt corporations, mutant kangaroos, improvised weapons, and a lead character who was as punk as they come. She was violent, crude, and didn't care what you thought of her, but yet, underneath the explosions and beer cans, the comic was quietly doing something radical. It gave us a female protagonist who wasn't built to be strong or sexy in a way Hollywood liked. She was impulsive, messy, vulgar, and somehow still full of heart, which earned the comic its cult status. In late 80s Britain, where politics were tense, youth culture was trying to claw its way out of polished pop and rebellion was in the air. Tank Girl offered a different kind of escape, one that didn't involve redemption arcs or heroes. For young women especially, she became a strange kind of role model, not for how she behaved, but for how completely bothered she was by what anyone expected her to be. Director Rachel Talalay discovered Tank Girl in a moment of chance. While working on Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, her stepdaughter handed her a copy of the comic. It was unlike anything she had seen, loud, raw, and unpredictable. Talalay instantly knew it needed to be a film, not some neat adaptation, but something alive, experimental, and jagged. She chased the rights for nearly a year, finally getting the green light from Deadline's publisher, Tom Astor. From there, Talalay pitched the project to a number of studios. Columbia passed, Amblin said no, Disney showed interest, but she turned them down, knowing they would never let her keep the swearing, the rough-edged politics, or anything even slightly risky. Eventually, MGM said yes, and that moment felt like a win, not just for Talalay, but for everyone who believed that Tank Girl could be more than just a weird little comic. There was genuine energy behind the adaptation. Jamie Hewlett and Alan Martin were brought in early to help shape the project, and Rachel Talalay was determined to preserve the comic's chaotic soul. She envisioned something visually unhinged, which was live action stitched together with animation, absurdist in tone, and loyal to the comic's punk sensibilities. No one was trying to make this neat or digestible because it was designed to be some ordinary comic book film. It was aiming for something brasher, stranger, and far less compromised. With MGM backing it, Tank Girl was officially moving forward. The cult comic was heading to theaters, and for the first time, it looked like she might just arrive in full force. The production, ambitions, challenges, and creative choices. The world of Tank Girl was meant to feel scavenged, and that vision came alive through the film's gritty and hyper-stylized production design. Most of it was shot in the heat and dust of the American Southwest, with White Sands, New Mexico offering up alien landscapes of bone-dry dunes, while the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona gave the film its scorched post-collapse vibe. Some sets were built inside open pit mines and abandoned malls, while others were found on the fly, in old tunnels, forgotten warehouses, which were transformed with scrap metal, spray paint, and unhinged imagination. At the center of that vision was production designer Catherine Hardwicke. She wasn't a studio favorite since she was too indie, too unknown, and too rough around the edges, but that's exactly why Talalay wanted her. Hardwicke walked into pre-production with sketchbooks full of chaos, and everyone who got it knew she was the only one who could build this world. She pulled off sets that felt less like movie locations and more like places you'd stumble into after the end of the world, graffiti-covered, clashing in texture and tone. For the Rippers, genetically enhanced kangaroo-human hybrids, Talalay reached out to Stan Winston, almost expecting to be ignored. This was the guy behind Jurassic Park and Aliens, after all. Winston said yes. Not just yes, He slashed his studio's usual rates in half because he wanted in. His team built full-body animatronic suits with moving ears, tails, and snouts, which were all very intricate. No CGI or puppets, but actors who were buried under hours of makeup and mechanics, bringing these oddball mutants to life with real weight and texture. Then there was the music. Courtney Love had initially wanted to audition for the role of Subgirl, but shifted behind the scenes, helping shape the soundtrack instead. It wasn't a seamless process, there were battles, but Courtney pushed for something loud and jagged, a sonic landscape as chaotic as Tank Girl's mind. The result was a mixtape of mid-90s defiance, which amplified the visuals as well. At first, Hewlett and Martin were part of this world too. The original comics creators were consulted during early development, and Hewlett even contributed concept art for characters and sets. But as production moved forward, that collaboration started to fade. Animations were cut and scenes were altered. Entire sequences, including an elaborate musical number, were softened. What had once felt like a punk experiment began bending towards something more marketable. Studio interference didn't completely break the film, but it definitely left its sticky fingerprints everywhere. What was meant to be a full-volume rebellion got edited into something more cautious. Plot and style. Punk aesthetics meet Hollywood. After a comet strikes Earth, rainfall stops entirely. The planet becomes one long dust storm of survival, and water, the thing we waste without thinking, turns into currency, power, and control. One corporation, Water and Power, seizes it all. Their grip is brutal. If you have a well, they take it. If you resist, they erase you. And the man behind the empire is Kesley, a smiling tyrant played by Malcolm McDowell, whose entire aesthetic is dystopia dressed in corporate chic. Rebecca Buck, better known as Tank Girl, is part of a rogue commune surviving off one of the last independent water sources in the Australian outback. When W&P raid their home, her boyfriend is killed. A young girl named Sam is also taken. Tank Girl is tortured, captured, and pushed to the brink, but breaking isn't in her nature. She makes friends with Jet Girl, quiet, fiercely intelligent mechanic stuck in W&P's rank. These two escape, steal a tank and a fighter jet, and begin their warpath to rescue Sam and destroy W&P from the inside. Along the way, they team up with the Rippers, who are mutant super soldiers bred from human and kangaroo DNA, created for war but abandoned by their makers. They're anarchic, strange, and deeply loyal to each other. Among them are Booga, who eventually becomes Tank Girl's love interest, and Ice-T's T-Saint, who doesn't really trust the girls but respects their fight. The plot is chaotic and kinetic. They infiltrate a sex club to save Sam, humiliate the madam by forcing her to sing Cole Porter at gunpoint, and take part in a full-blown assault on the W&P compound. There are betrayals, explosions, but also, eventually, justice. In the final moments, Tank Girl takes down Kesley, rescues Sam, and rides off through rushing water with Booga in tow, finally breaking the drought and the system. But compared to Jamie Hewlett and Alan Martin's source material, the film is actually quite restrained. The comic was pure chaos, which is non-linear, aggressively feminist, irreverent, and never interested in conventional narrative arcs. The movie adds goals, structure, and emotional beats, but loses some of that wild, lawless rhythm in the process. Still, what it keeps is that core rebellion. Tank Girl, Jet Girl, Kesley, and the Rippers, they all orbit around one idea that when systems fail, they break. Even in this more downplayed form, the film retains the essence that made Tank Girl interesting in the first place. Release and reception. Box office flop to cult classic. Tank Girl was released in the US in March 1995 with a $25 million budget, with a rebellious lead in a studio that didn't quite know what to do with either. Despite a glitter-filled premiere at Mann's Chinese Theater, the film tanked at the box office. Its opening weekend pulled in just over $2 million, and its total US gross stopped at a disappointing $4 million. International sales added a couple of million more, but the numbers couldn't hide the truth. Tank Girl was a commercial misfire. Critics weren't kind either. On Rotten Tomatoes, it hovers at 45%, with calling it exhausting, incoherent, and overstyled. Roger Ebert gave it 2 out of 4 stars, admitting that it was visually ambitious, but writing that its manic energy wore him down. Janet Maslin said the movie's over-the-top style drowned out its plot, pointless, but admiring Petty's fearless performance. Owen Gleiberman was a lot more blunt. He called the film amateurish, giving it a C-, claiming Petty's performance was the only thing that kept the movie together. The audience was equally baffled. While CinemaScore gave it a middling B, the general consensus was that people didn't really know what they were watching watching? Was it a dystopian action film, a post-apocalyptic punk cabaret, a comic book come to life? In truth, it was all of these things, and that might have been the problem. Catherine Hardwicke's production design was electric. Courtney Love helped curate the soundtrack. Stan Winston's mutant kangaroo suits were bizarrely beautiful, and none of that could fix the marketing, which didn't seem to know who the film was for. Talalay reflected that the studio didn't understand how to sell a film that centered a defiant, loud, and aggressively feminist protagonist. Still, what started as a box office flop has grown into something else entirely. Tank Girl eventually found her audience, just not right away. The film was too weird to live, but also too rare to die, and maybe that's exactly how Tank Girl would have wanted it. Legacy. Feminist icon and cult movie status. Tank Girl was built to survive critical confusion, corporate sanitization, and decades of being misunderstood. And she did. Somehow, against the grain, Tank Girl eventually found her tribe. Over time, this comic adaptation began to settle into the bones of feminist and punk communities like a scar we're proud to show off. She was never polished or palatable, and that's the point. Tank Girl didn't want to be your role model. She wanted to burn your rules down, rescue the girl from the villain's lair, and steal your ride while looking incredible in goggles. That sort of energy doesn't really fade quietly. It mutates. It resurfaces in Riot Girl posters, zines, thrifted bomber jackets scrawled with lipstick slogans, and art house screenings packed with queers and anarchists who knew every line. She lived on through subculture first, through fan art, mixtapes, and girls who dressed like they could punch patriarchy in the throat. And slowly, you started to see her DNA in places that no one would have expected. In Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn's unhinged girl gang Revenge carries the same neon middle finger to the male gaze, echoing the punk aesthetic and gleeful violence. In Mad Max Fury Road, the aesthetic of desert chaos and scrappy rebellion feels eerily similar. The way Scott Pilgrim messes with frames and panels owes something to Tank Girl's fearless visual mashup of sketch art, live action, and animated cut-ins. More than style, Tank Girl left behind an attitude. She turned girl power into something sharper, louder, and less marketable. In retrospect, the film was weird in all the right ways. It didn't care about what made a woman likable because it refused to tidy up the mess. It carved out a place in the history of comic book films that's still unmatched. A punk outlier in a genre full of redemption arcs, origin stories, and grimdark reboots. And in doing so, in 2019, Margot Robbie's production company Lucky Chap secured the rights to a Tank Girl reboot. Development was delayed thanks to the pandemic, but the fact that anyone is still fighting to bring Tank Girl back to life says it all. Tank Girl is significant as she broke the boundaries of what female characters could achieve both on the pages of a comic book and on the cinema screens. The film might have been dismissed by the critics as it was released, yet it connected with people who were weary of two-dimensional female characters. This resonance grew into a long-term cultural influence with time. Perhaps the most enduring thing that Tank Girl has managed to do is demonstrate that it's possible to focus on female rage, humor, and unpredictable elements without necessarily softening them to make them more comfortable. She opened up the room to female representation in genres in which male power fantasies ruled, and although the movie toned down some of the radical edges of the comic, it also kept that core belief. Women were allowed to be loud, angry, violent, complex, and also effective hero. By opening up, she left a legacy, not in the way that she was received, but rather the way that she had opened doors to what would be told in the future. What went wrong? Studio interference and creative clashes. When Rachel Talalay signed on to direct Tank Girl, she was trying to translate the anarchic spirit of a counterculture heroine into a medium still resistant to women-led genre films. What began as a passion project soon became a cautionary tale and creative interference. Her vision was apologetically loud, weird, and definitely feminist. Once MGM stepped in, the vision was very systematically diluted. Talalay has since spoken candidly about the challenges she had faced. She described the studio's lack of trust in her vision and frustration with the film's punk tone. In one interview, she admitted, "I always wanted the movie to be a 1 or a 10. You get it or you don't." But with all the studio interference, it became a messy 5. The cuts were substantial and left the film with jarring tonal inconsistencies. Among the most notable scenes removed was Tank Girl's dildo-decorated bedroom, a surreal space that would have embodied her chaotic sexuality and refusal to conform. Another casualty was a scene where she puts a condom on a banana and throws it at a soldier, which is bizarre and quintessentially Tank Girl. These were tonal markers. Each removed scene chipped away at the comic's voice, but perhaps the most damaging was the decision to cut the original ending, a live-action scene where it begins to rain, depicting the reclamation of natural resources and freedom. While animated interludes were already a part of the original plan, the studio expanded their use to cover up for the missing scenes, which seemed like a quick fix for narrative gaps. This shattered Tank Girl's structure and tone. What could have been a bold, punk, feminist milestone became a compromised vision. Over time, it gained cult status, but still remains a cautionary tale of what's lost when studios stifle daring and unconventional storytelling. Conclusion: why Tank Girl endures. Tank Girl remains relevant due to its nonconformist nature right up to the core. It offers a leading lady who's vocal, rebellious, and never a romantic or moralizing figure. The movie doesn't attempt to make her less stark or rationalize her actions, but allows her to live by her own rules. Visually, its comic book paneling and animation techniques, along with its non-standard editing decisions, indicate an unwillingness to adhere to traditional storytelling norms. Though production challenges curbed its potential, the fundamentals of identity were still preserved. Tank Girl still seems willful and erratic in relation to the clean and calculated superhero movies today. It presents a character who's mature enough and is not going to change to suit anybody. It's that creative autonomy that has made it survive. It's not nostalgia, but rather the realization that this is a film that knew what it was trying to be and never attempted to be anything more. Marvelous verdict. And that brings us to the end of our wild ride through Tank Girl, a film that refused to behave and in doing so became unforgettable. We hope you've enjoyed this journey into her world with us, a world where girls build their own tanks, where mutant kangaroos fight the system, and where style is as much a weapon as any gun. If you're a longtime fan or just meeting her for the first time, we'd love to hear what Tank Girl means to you. Also, if you enjoyed the content, maybe consider leaving us a like and subscribing to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, stay curious, stay rebellious, and as always, stay marvelous.